But needless to say, I talk about AI a lot. I have worked with the DfE on the National Guidance for AI that has gone out to all schools, and it's free, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. So I kind of have two hats. I work in design education as design advisor for Fleet, and I work in AI in education, and very often I work where the two Venn diagrams cross over, and that's why I'm happiest at the moment working in design education AI, which is what I'm going to show you now. So put your hands up. Who has used artificial intelligence in the context of their professional role? Oh wow, that's so good. A year ago it was like, this is how fast this stuff's changing. So there's an awful lot to consider. So I'm going to show you some use cases and some, hopefully some inspirational stories, but I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about the things that you have to consider. There is a lot of fear, and all of you that put your hands up today that have already used it, you may have encountered that fear, whether in yourself when you first started, or definitely amongst your colleagues when you're saying I'm experimenting with artificial intelligence or I'm using AI. You will no doubt have come across colleagues who think of AI as this massive scary lion created on Midjourney coming towards you and coming towards them. So you can see there's some positives to this, there's some negatives to this, there's a lot of misconceptions in the world of artificial intelligence, and I'm going to unpick some of those today. So there's a lot going on, and it is incredibly hard to keep up. I try my best to keep up, but even on a Monday morning, if I've switched off over the weekend, somebody will have released something that changes the direction of design education. And there's so much happening, and there are so many people talking about it in a positive way, in a negative way, and I'm going to focus all of this down today to design and technology. I'm going to talk about textiles, a tiny bit about food, and mostly about product design and industrial design. So, in the world of professional design, artificial intelligence is changing the workflow of professional designers. Already in the world of professional and industrial design, AI is being integrated into the creative process. Now, when I say that, I know some of you will be thinking, but surely it takes away from our creativity. It depends on how we use it. If the idea is ours, if the sketch is ours, if we then put it through an artificial generator to give us clarity, to give us communication, to give us engagement, then we are using it for a positive good. And for the most part today, I'm going to be talking about how we can use it for communication, how we as educators can use it, but also how our students can start to use it. And I say that really specifically when I say start to use it, because there's a huge caveat there around safety, around safeguarding, around GDPR, around IP, around copyright. There's lots to unpick when we start letting the students use this. So we have to do it with caution, and we have to do it in a way that we are very, very considered. But I'm going to dive straight in on a use case that I did with my class. I had a Year 8 class, and if you came to my talk last year, you'll remember this. This is an old use case at this point. But Padlet is one of 3 tools that I recommend as being safe for use with students, and I'll go through what those 3 are. Padlet is one of them. And the reasons behind that is because their safeguarding protocols are locked down. However, another huge caveat is me saying this today in a conference does not mean that you should go and use it carte blanche. Is that the right word? Carte blanche? You need to go through due diligence in your own setting, with your own settings AI policy, if there is one yet, and then you need to have your tool that you want to use signed off. Which does make it a little bit cumbersome. When we're dealing with student use, we do have to go through that process. So anyway, Padlet, fantastic. Year 8s come in, they are miserable, it's been raining, they're really grumpy, they don't want to be in DT, they want to be out playing football in the rain, and I asked them all to close their eyes and imagine a vehicle of the future. In fact, this case was a motorbike of the future. I told them to really push their imagination, really be creative with the colours, the aesthetics, and then to open their eyes and to use Think, Pair, Share to share with their neighbour what was in their mind's eye. Now, through that process, they were using their oracy skills. They were then unpicking the vocabulary as a pair. and using their literacy skills to think about, well, is there a clearer word we can use there? Is there a more succinct way of saying that? And they distilled down a sentence between them in their pair that they could then plug in to the AI generator within Padlet to produce a AI generated image. And we call that prompt. And I know that this is old now, this is all very basic stuff. A lot of you are going to be sitting there going, okay, I know about prompting, I've been doing this a while. But when you have the whole class prompting all at the same time, in real time, with the screen on in your room, and they're all generating at the same time, and they're all popping up in real time, and then as the teacher, you're able to moderate that, and then you're able to unpick it as a class because it's all on the screen, it's really useful. Now this one is a slightly different use case. This use case is doing the exact same thing I just did with the motorbikes, except my learning goal has changed. My learning goal before was just, let's wake up our imaginations, let's go, let's be excited, let's love D&T today. This was, let's understand ergonomics, let's understand anthropometrics, let's understand target market, user-centered design. I had a little bit more nuance to my learning goals that I had set for this lesson. But what I did was I took that and I thought, well, how can AI help me to teach those things? So every pupil in the class was given a secret target market, and they weren't to tell each other what that was. Then they were to prompt in a couple of sentences to create a toothbrush, because that was the brief, or rather a implement that could clean teeth, because we don't want to break the brief by giving the end result in the question. So we said, you've got to clean teeth, you need to create a product that can clean teeth, and you all have secret clients, and now you've generated an image. So again, in real time, starter activity only, 15 minutes max, this whole activity from start to finish. These were popping up on the screen, and I was able to use this as a resource that had been generated in real time. And I was able to stand there and say, okay, thanks guys, everybody's anonymously put these things on the board, let's unpick them. Who do we think this one might be for? Anybody want to play being year 8? What kind of person might need a toothbrush like this?
Is it a dog or a person?
It's not a dog, but it is somebody that doesn't have access. So this person was a paraplegic person. So this is something that would have suckers on the back and it would stick to something and then you wouldn't need to use arms. What about this one? What kind of client might this be for? Target market. A kid, yeah. So why? Who said that?
So it's interesting, it's fun, and it's...
Yeah, so as a teacher now, I'm using this as my real-time resource, and I'm able to have a conversation with you now and pull out some of that vocabulary. I might say, well, let's talk about aesthetics when we're talking about that. Let's talk about target market. Let's really unpick this. So I'm able to use this AI-generated real-time resource for really deep learning. So it doesn't have to just be a cherry on top. Now, what I just showed you, was text-to-image generation, where you put in a prompt and you get out an image. What I'm now going to talk to you about is image-to-image generation, and this is where it gets really interesting for resource generation for us, but also when the students use it. So the second tool that I would recommend as investigating as being safe for use with students is a tool called newark.ai. You might have heard of it, you might have seen people talking about it. By the way, I can see people writing notes. In the directory, I have got a double page, and it's got all the hints and tips. Where is it? It's got all the hints and tips, and I mention the names of all the tools. So if you want to, just bookmark that and find the tools, and then you can have a play later on. But essentially, what you need is a starting image, you need a prompt, and then you can create a final render, if you like, or an iterative render. And you can do it for all sorts of different things. Now, Newark is free for education. You just need to prove that you're a teacher and they'll give you a free account. The professionals that use Newark are mostly in the fashion world, sports fashion to be really precise. Two of their biggest clients are Reebok and Adidas. That also means that they've locked down the IP within the product, so you can be sure that it's not training off the students' work that you put in there, which is a big red flag in the DFE safety guidance, that we can't use any tools that would train off students' work. Which means that that's why we have these educational wrappers around some of the big LLMs, and why we wouldn't say use ChatGPT, we'd say use Magic School, or use Canva, or use something that's got these safeguarding things in place. But just jumping back to Newark can render images with the physics of the properties of the materials in mind. So with fabrics, for example, when generating this sketch of this dress, it hangs differently depending on the fabric that it's been rendered in. And in the interior design, you can see that the qualities of the materials, the material properties, are really coming out visually. So students can use this to iterate with their designs. They could try and have different versions of the same design. And if I just skip ahead to this slide, you can see what I mean. So this was a Year 9 student, and she was designing a military vest for female students. And she knew the vague colours, she kind of had some ideas of textures, but she wasn't sure. So she was able to iterate these small thumbnails to play with colours and textures and fabrics and styles. And then she was able to put that into her work and say, from doing this AI experimentation with my design, I have now decided to go down the route of choosing canvas or choosing leather or whatever it was that she chose. So that's for iteration, but we can also use it for just clear communication. So this was a sixth form class, and they had already, I think, done a pretty good job with their palette project final sketches for this project that they were doing. But we got out the Newark in one of their final lessons, and we rendered up their drawings into professional quality photographs of their products. The motivation in the class was enormous. They were Year 12, this class. They loved it. They felt proud of their work. They wanted to take the photograph home and say, look, this is my chair in photographic realization. Ooh, didn't know it could do that. It's magic. And they were so proud. So to give them that pride in their work, even though, and this is a little side tangent, but even though if they were to put this into a piece of coursework, they may not get credit for that image, they would get credit for the prompt that they'd written, and they would get credit from any critical analysis that they then did from that image. So if they put this image in and they'd said, from this AI generation, I have now considered this, and I will now go on to do this, then that thinking gets credit. The actual image doesn't get credit. The other big red flag when it comes to JCQ and the Joint Centre for Qualifications and plagiarism within coursework, because I know that that's a big question, is you must cite the source. So if they were going to put this image in, they just need to just put a line underneath it saying, this is my sketch rendered in Newark AI. Done. That's all they need to say, and then it wouldn't be a problem. If they put it in cold and claimed that it was their work, it's exactly the same rules as if they put in a photograph of somebody else's work and claimed it as their work. It's the AI's render of their work. So it can lead them to more thinking, it can lead them to more development, and it definitely has huge benefit, but you just need to make sure they've cited it. And I've done work with AQA and OCR and EdXL on this, and they're all on the same page when it comes to GCSE and A-level D&T.
Sorry, just checking. Are they allowed to put generated by AI, or do they have to put the specific website?
I would advise the specific tool. Yeah, I would advise the specific tool, and also because the tool has to be within the safeguarding parameters, because there's a whole world of issues around student use with AI. So if they say this has been used using Newark, or this has been used using Canva, then if a really diligent exams officer wanted to check that they were using a safe tool, or that the school had signed off a safe tool, then they could. Whereas if you just say AI, they might be using Midjourney, for example, which I wouldn't recommend for student use. Totally recommend for our use because it's brilliant, but I wouldn't recommend it for student use because the safeguarding parameters are not there. So I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. So this is one of my favourite stories, and I'm really sorry if you were in the session last year because I have kept this in the presentation because it is such a meaningful story. And that is that these 4 students all believed they were terrible at design and technology. They all hated the subject. They all would come into the class and say, I can't draw. And we've all heard kids come in and say, I can't draw, rubbish methodology, do this. And this student, I'm sorry to those people that are around the side, but this student, you can see just the sheer amount of rubbing out that he went through. He was drawing like this, and I don't want anyone to see, and drawing like this, and just hating his work. We put their rudimentary sketches into New Art, and they all left that lesson, and it was a very short lesson, but they all left going, wow, I love D&T, it's amazing, it's the best thing ever, can I keep printing that out so I can show my mum? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for the next lesson. And I felt great. And you know, when we're talking about what did they learn, yes, they learnt rendering techniques, yes, they may have learned a little bit about light and shade, but there was this other thing that happened in that lesson, and it wasn't necessarily technical knowledge, but it was a huge motivation boost and absolutely worth it. So this slide is again just a very simple slide to show that a very simple sketch can do some amazing things. And if you haven't already tried image to image, then please do. Now I was talking about sixth form, I was talking about year 9, but this works for any age. This is my now 6 at the time 5-year-old son, who I wanted to have an early years example. So we were doing some sort of ugly dolls, ugly plush toy project around the kitchen table on a Sunday, and he sketched out this guy. And then through his oracy skills, I was able to pull out a prompt. My slightly older daughter, through her literacy skills, I was able to pull out a prompt because I made her write it down. But essentially, the learning that was happening in this was really lovely, really magical. They were both so excited. He couldn't decide between Eric and Derek, and obviously named them himself, so we kept them both. But my point is that it can be done with upper 6 who loved it, and it can be done with early years as well. Obviously with early years I was collecting in the information from one child verbally, from the other child a little slip of paper, and then I was putting it into the input myself. Slight tangent, reverse engineering projects. This is, well, I'm sticking with my own children for a second. This is a drawing that one of them did, and then and I said to him, what is that? And he said, oh, it's my cuddly ninja rabbit. And he said, I'd love to make a cuddly ninja rabbit. So I said, okay, well, let's try. Put the image into ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, how would we make this cuddly ninja rabbit toy out of felt? And it gave me a step-by-step. Big caveat, if you're going to do this in your lesson prep, you must read through everything. You must be the critical human at this stage and read through it. Now I wasn't going to be teaching this to a class. I was just doing it with my son, and I just thought that's a nice use case to talk about conferences. I'll bung it in. So it's unchecked. But I then said, well, can you show me how that looks? And then ChatGPT presented me with the finished item of what it expected this process to be able to create. Again, sticking with my own children for a minute, and the Monsters project. We took the Monsters project a little bit further, and I was thinking, how can we communicate, and in design communication, how can we communicate with some of these AI tools that are around? So if another tool that I recommend you have a play with, and if you do have small kids at home, or if you're a primary teacher, then the meta-animated drawings is really fun to do. You have your drawing and it asks you to put little pivot points. So you select the pivot points. So I was putting little points on the hands and the elbows and the shoulders, and then it asks you what, it just has some drop downs. It says what do you want it to do, and then it will dance and run across the screen and do some lovely things. And I've had colleagues in the AI education space doing some really lovely things with this, with storytelling and with English and with communication, and with bringing things to life. But my main passion is design and technology, so I was thinking, well, how can we use artificial intelligence within design and technology? What could we do for Key Stage 3, for example? If we had a sketch of a product, could we then take that sketch of a product and could we make it, and could we put it into a project using artificial intelligence? So this is a child sketch and then a render with New Arc AI, and then I took it into another tool called the New Black AI. And the New Black AI can make animations, but it can also make OBJ files and STL files. So it was then able to create our little monster in 3D. And I could iterate. I could say in my prompting, actually I want the tail to look a little bit different, because it's guessing as to the back of this. So I need to give it as much information in my written prompting as possible for it to fill in the gaps. And then we were able to 3D print it. So we could then take that into a whole scheme of work of integrating AI into the design journey. So going back to Newark, since last year when I did this talk, Newark have had lots of upgrades. And before AI got its claws into me, I was a big Photoshopper. I loved graphic design, I loved working with Photoshop, and I still do. And what Newark's now done is it's taken some of those Photoshop skills and it's put it into its program. So if you get a render that you're not 100% happy with, you can now go in and you can now select certain areas to then iterate with and to prompt just certain sections. So if you render up an image of a clown wearing a red hat, you could just highlight the hat and say change this to yellow or change this to fur, and it will change that. Also since last year, I said that there was an old example with those 4 students that couldn't draw. Unfortunately, I can't give the student this, but since we had that lesson, we can now take it one step further and animate it. Or we can take it, and this was the student who was like this. We can now take his work and we could 3D print it, turn it into an STL or OBJ file. There we go. You see it moving. So that, what you just saw, was another example from my kitchen table on a Sunday morning of my son had drawn a man, and I said, oh, who's that? And he said, oh, this is Jeff. And I said, tell me about Jeff. And he said, oh, he's really funny, he's doing something silly. And we had a conversation about Jeff, and then we were able to put that image into the new Black AI and ask for it to generate a Pixar quality animation. Red flag. Anybody hear the red flag in what I just said? Yes. It's all right when I'm doing it at home with my child, making a Pixar quality animation, but I wouldn't do that at school. Why wouldn't I do it at school, do you think?
Copyright.
Exactly. So we're now getting into some sort of grey areas where we're thinking, well, if any of you were following the Studio Ghibli, anybody do a Studio Ghibli of themselves? Anybody want to be honest? So when ChatGPT released its image generator, and it is fantastic, it is brilliant. The social media was awash with people putting selfies of themselves and then turning themselves into Studio Ghibli characters in a couple of seconds, or turning themselves into Disney princesses. And I've been guilty of that. I particularly like the Muppet version of me, it's great. But what we're doing there is we're taking other the intellectual properties from other areas. We're taking the likeness from big studios, and it gets into a really grey area. And as I'm talking now, there are some massive lawsuits going on. Disney have taken Midjourney to court over copyright. And I use Midjourney a lot, and I'm going to talk about Midjourney in a moment, but there is a lot to be aware in this space, that when we're talking about these things and we're getting excited and we're thinking, oh my gosh, my 5-year-old could make his own Pixar movie, which is what I was doing, I then went, hang on a minute, that's not actually a good thing. Like, I shouldn't be able to make a Pixar movie in my kitchen. This is going too fast, and we need to just take a beat and think about the rules here and some of these issues. So, that was a bit of dark. I'm going to get positive again. I said that fashion is sort of ahead of the curve when it comes to some of this stuff. Now, one thing that a lot of design education doesn't realise is that fashion are at the absolute cutting edge and forefront of computer-aided design. They're also at the absolute cutting edge and forefront of AI and design. So some of these tools are brilliant when you think about your textiles classes, because the fabric works really well, the rendering works really well, and it can be really exciting. So I left the classroom in July to work for Cleeps and to do this a lot more often. So I was running out of raw materials running out of guinea pig materials basically to put through AI. So I went under my sofa and I went back in time and I dug out my portfolio as a 17-year-old doing my A-level. I'm going back a bit now. And this was my non-digital big fat A2 folder that I got out. And I remember doing this project as an A-level student, and it was a fashion project for the Evian Water Company. And I took a photograph of the final design, and I was able to render up my work from 20 plus years ago. And I was actually quite emotional by it, and I thought, wow, you know, if I could go back in time and tell 17-year-old Trudi that she could do this, would she do it? And I thought, I would have absolutely grabbed this, I would have wanted to do it, I would have wanted to put my work through this, it wouldn't have detracted from my creative process, I would have just wanted to do this. And I thought, well, that must be where some of the students are right now. And then I took it into the New Black, and I made her dance, and this is when I was literally like, I need to just wipe a tear from my eye, this is getting a bit intense now, that this old drawing that I had drawn suddenly started dancing in front of me in the dress that I had imagined when I was 17. So I think that back then I would have absolutely wanted to do this, and I think that's where our students are going to be, or at least some of them. And they're going to be doing this in their bedrooms at home because they can, just like my little boy in this Pixar film in our kitchen. They can do it at home, they will be doing it at home, and we need to help them and harness it and make sure we direct it into the most positive route for their work and their creative process as possible. And we have a responsibility to stay up to date with it, we have a responsibility to stay safe with it, but we have a responsibility to stay on top of it. So if you haven't, so I know I sound a bit lectury right now, but if you haven't played with this stuff yet, and your job title is design and technology teacher, understand that this is the biggest technological shift that's happening at the moment, and that you have a responsibility to get on it. Sorry, that was very heavy. Get positive again and tell you another little story. So in between 17-year-old me and me at whatever age I am now, which won't be disclosed, I worked in the theatre before I did my PGCE, and these two drawings here and here were character drawings that I had drawn for a three-hander play. The three-hander was a husband and wife and the mistress. The mistress was sassy, she was aggressive, she had spunk, she was great. And I remember sitting down with the director of this show and saying, I need to talk about Rebecca. I want her to have slicked black hair, I want her to have leather trousers with leather boots on, I want her fringe to be slightly too long, I want her to be aggressive and sassy. And I remember him sort of understanding that the communication was all verbal, the communication was all around this board, and in reality this board is just a canvas board, and it's just Sharpie pen with coloured watercolour on it and a few swatches down the side. So we were around this board having this conversation. What if I could go back in time and have that conversation now? What would I do? I would do this. I am Rebecca. I live in the country. I am Rebecca. So that video took about 10 minutes to make, and I used a few different tools. So the sketch was me, the render was New Arc AI, the movement and animation was the New Black AI, and the music, which I don't know whether you caught what she was saying, but she was saying, I am Rebecca, I live in the country, was the Mareka AI. I gave it the sentence, it then made me a rock song with aggression. The animation, I put in a little prompt saying I want her to have sass, I want her to have her hand on her hip, I want her to pop her hip. So it was very much what was in my head, it was very much my vision, but I really harnessed these tools to be able to communicate as a designer my design idea to my client, which in this case was the director. So this 360 holistic view of how we can communicate as designer has never been easier now. So do we sit down with our client if we're an A-level student and sit with our client and say, this is my sketch that I have rendered beautifully myself, and the designer says, yeah, but what does it look like? What does it look like from behind? Or what does it feel like? Or you know, what emotion is it going to evoke? And you know, obviously different areas of design are more closely suited to this than others. And obviously theatre, and my use case is really suited to this, because I really wanted to have that evocative can do this. You can have this 360 design. So another use case that I'm about to show you is I had a opportunity to spend the morning with a student with quite difficulties. She had difficulties, and at first I thought she may be non-verbal. She was very, very, very shy, and her communication was very, very limited. She was in year 8, and she came in to spend some time with me wanting to boost some of her D&T skills, and she just wanted to do some fun stuff. And I said to her, well, bring a sketchbook with you of your work that you do at home, and we'll take it from there. So she brought a sketchbook. She brought a sketchbook in, and it turned out that she liked Japanese anime, and we had this image of a Japanese anime girl. She knew all about it. She told me the name of it. I can't even say it. Hatsune Miku. Anybody a Japanese anime fan in the room? No? Okay. Neither was I. But she knew all about the character. She knew who this was. And I said, well, let's make a music video together. So in about half an hour,
my name is Hatsune Miku, a digital star, shining light. My voice is clear, my tone is true, crafted in tech to sing for you. Through every screen I come alive, a melody that will survive.
Oh, I turned it down too much.
Oh, beneath the moon, no matter where you hear my voice, it fills the world with endless joy.
So that took about half an hour to make with her, maybe a bit less, and this was the process we went through. So it was her sketch. We then used her prompt to create a new arc image. We then used another of her prompts to create a new black dance. We then created a poem. We're using Marika about the character, again with her prompts. We then used that poem to create a song, and we then put it all together using CapCut on my phone, which was incredibly quick and easy. If you've never used CapCut, it's brilliant, 'cause it's so quick and easy. And she felt great about that. But I thought, this is great, but I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not teaching filmmaking. I'm a D&T teacher. Let's pull this back a little bit. Let's think about how we can bring this into the classroom as a D&T teacher. So we stayed with Marut, or whatever her name is, and we turned her into a cartoon. We turned the cartoon into a line drawing. We turned the line drawing into an STL file. We did a little bit of tinkering with the STL file. We laser cut an impression of this, and I introduced her to wet and dry paper. I introduced her to the laser cutter. I introduced her to soldering. She'd never soldered anything before. And circuitry, and this is all within the space of an hour. I know I had a one-to-one experience, but still, we could spread this into a 6-week project. And then she made a little box of her components, and then we were able to make a nightlight of her sketch that she'd walked into the room with. And again, it was just a really lovely, magical experience, because this was her image, her sketch, her work. And then I sort of took it and wanted to teach certain things along the way, and used artificial intelligence to help get us there. So, just going to go back to some of the serious stuff to do with AI for a second. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I worked on the DFE project.
We are living through a period of significant technological change. It's more important than ever that we move in a considered and safe way,
grounded in critical thinking, professional judgment, and ethical responsibility.
There has to be human oversight and accountability.
We need to make sure that we're following best practice whilst being aware of the limitations and potential biases.
And avoid actions which would infringe data protection or intellectual property law.
A 2024 Ofcom survey found that nearly half of children had already used generative AI. This toolkit has been developed through wide engagement with educators. We asked teachers and leaders for views on AI, and their input has directly informed our approach.
So you may not have come across this yet, because it only came out a couple of months ago, but it's free for every school, and it's got a wealth of resources in there. I think it's 5 different modules. and it takes you through everything that a school needs to think about. If any of you are in leadership, there is a leadership unit that helps you write the policy for your school or your setting, and helps you go through how to consider GDPR, how to consider IP, how to consider everything, safeguarding in particular. So I just wanted to quickly whiz through some of the slides from the use cases, because I've been talking about some whiz-bang stuff with image to image and text to image, but there's some other stuff in AI that you can try. We break it down into teaching and learning, personalised learning, and administrative processes. I'm going to mostly focus on teaching and learning. You can make lesson plans. Who's tried to make a lesson plan using artificial intelligence? Okay, maybe a third. Who thinks they would do it again? Who thinks they wouldn't do it again? Okay, that's interesting. So there's tons and tons of lesson planning tools out there. There's lots of wrappers. You can go direct to an LLM. When I use the word LLM, I'm talking about a large language model. That's sort of the overview infrastructure of AI, like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. But then you can have wrapper apps that will ask you specifically for certain inputs. So you might have Magic School AI that says, we can make lesson plans. Padlet has inbuilt lesson plans. Canva has inbuilt lesson planning. And all that means is that they have written a prompt on top of the LLM, which means that your prompt will have a supported prompt underneath it. And that supported prompt often incorporates safeguarding policy into it, if they're doing it correctly. And that's where schools need to go down the due diligence route, finding out what that is and are they doing it correctly. So, lesson planning. Breaking down or translating written content. You can bung in some content, you can ask it for a different reading age. Really useful. Differentiating on the hoof. I differentiated live in lessons quite often. You can't understand that because you've just moved from Hong Kong, no problem, I'll translate it, here you go. Oh, you have a poor reading age, I understand, don't worry, I'll translate it for you, there you go. Really quick differentiation on the hoof. And it can be visual differentiation. You're not engaged, you're on your phone, how dare you. What are you interested in? Oh, it turns out that you're a big Downton Abbey fan. We're doing this thing on textiles at the moment. So I'm going to render up some images that are in the world of Downton Abbey to re-engage you back into the session. Sorry, that was incredibly embarrassing. I apologise. But there are some other engaging things. So you can make raps, you can make rhymes, you can do fun stuff with your content. Anybody done this before? Anybody made raps or rhymes or silly things? Revision's great. You get your class in and they're really fed up and you think, how can I make this piece of content interesting? Let's ask ChatGPT to make a rap about it. Who wants to volunteer getting on the mic and drop it and spit in some rhythms, or whatever you say, to Planet Rap to learn our solar systems, for example. You can ask help from the large language models to help you create mnemonics, to help you explain things, or to put things in the world of that individual. As I said about the Downton Abbey example, this is an example of teaching a certain topic in maths and putting it into a maths problem to do with the Avengers means that you're meeting them where they are, engaging them and putting it into a way that you can pull them back in. I'm going to skip that one. So there are so many examples in the DFE materials, and I'll let you go through them yourself. Some of them are for SEND learners. This one is for a autistic student who happens to love trains, so you're able to put it into their learning. Has anybody ever tried Notebook LM here? Notebook LM is amazing because what Notebook LM can do is it can take a document and it can create resources from that document. It can make worksheets, it can break down the content, it can put it into different formats, it can put it into different reading ages, but it can also make podcasts, which is really fun. So this example is an A-level sociology text, which is really dry, and I just bunged it into Notebook LM and said, okay, I want this really boring text to be played to me in my earphones when I'm at the gym.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a pretty fundamental concept in sociology, one that aims to explain how societies functionalism.
You can also do it
we're going deep on this one. Functionalism.
Yeah.
It's it's a way of looking at society as this kind of complex system, right?
Like a machine.
So anyway, they go on to teach functionalism in their really cool, writing, podcasty way. And there are lots of university students that are doing this with long texts and with long textbooks so that they can listen to the podcasts, you know, when they're at the gym or when they're driving. And it's quite an interesting way to turn your information into a different form for revision. You can do boring things with AI as well. It can help you do letter writing, it can help you rewrite difficult emails, it can proofread for you, it can help you write policies. You can give it different pieces of information and say, I want this, but I want this to look like this, and I want it with this content, so you can feed in different things into the generative AI. This is incredibly important though. Must check the outputs of everything that comes out of generative AI, whether it be visual outputs or text, because generative AI likes to hallucinate, make stuff up, and it can get things wrong. Maybe not as often as humans do, but still it does get things wrong, and it's up to us as the professional in the loop to be professional about it and not be over-reliant, and to just double check and do our checks on it. Another relatively boring example, but it's still an example, you can plan trips. You can say, I want to go here, and I want to go here on this day, and the weather's going to be like this, and I've got this number of kids, and I've got this budget, and of those kids, 2 of them are ASD, what do I do? And it will take all of that information and synthesize a trip plan for you, and it'll say, oh well, you know, considering you've got 2 ASD kids and you're going to this town, you might want to consider this museum because it's interactive but not too noisy, or you might want to consider getting a coach rather than public transport, or whatever. It's really helpful, and it's just a great place to start. It might not be where you finish, but it's a great place to start. And you've probably heard a lot about how AI can help with teacher workload, and it's all this kind of stuff that's going to do it. The boring use cases, what I consider boring use cases of AI, are the bits that are really going to make a difference to our everyday life as educators, because we can just speed up processes. So, I'm nearly finished, I promise, and then I'll leave time for some questions. But we need to consider all of these sort of scary things that I've been talking about alongside having a lot of fun doing this and experimenting with it. So with that in mind, I took 3 images into a generator that needed 3 starting images and a prompt to create a video. This is using a tool called Kling AI. It's called Kling Elements. It's called Kling Elements because you give it the elements. And I gave it the object, the style, and the location, and a prompt of which I knocked some weight and years off myself. And then it produced a video that I could then dream that I actually looked like that in real life. Now that's really exciting and it's really funny, and I had a good laugh about it, and I showed my friends and I showed my husband, and he said, oh God, I wish you still looked like that. And all that kind of stuff, and that's great and it's lovely and it's warm and wonderful. But this could also be used for some pretty scary stuff. That's my face. That's my face, and that's not my body. So obviously you can imagine some of the other things that can be done to our students, and this is where safeguarding gets all messy and really sticky, and that's why the Keeping Safe in Education updates that came out last week, there was a big pushback that they didn't go far enough because it didn't really unpick some of this stuff. So the next round of the Keeping Children Safe in Education is going to hopefully unpick some of this scarier stuff around deepfakes, around bias, and all that kind of stuff. And just while we're going into bias, when we talk about AI and we talk about bias, we often think about it at surface level. And 2 years ago, I would have said that when we're talking about AI and we're talking about bias, we're talking about asking an LLM for an image of a doctor and it producing a white middle-class male and going, that's biased, because not all doctors are white, not all doctors are male. That is bias, but then there's some other bias that's starting to creep in. I took my LinkedIn profile picture and I put it into Midjourney and I said, animate this as happy and animate it as sad. And I'm just going to show you what it did. I'm sorry, but she's making eyes at you. And I was disturbed. I was like, whoa, I don't make those little coyish, little flirty little looks. But the AI version of me does, because it's trained on so many images of women doing just that, that when we then render up images, there is this sexual, over-sensual version of them, and it was a little bit unnerving. And that is a bias that we're not yet fully unpicking, but it's a bias that we have to be aware of, that when we ask for things, we just need to be aware of, well, that person is ridiculously good looking in this image. Why? Oh, because the ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever wants it to please you, and it wants to give you the best possible outcome. And you think, well, that's sort of bias in itself, and you know, not everybody looks like that, and not everybody sort of behaves like that when they're happy or when they're sad. So, I was going to very briefly talk about another big juggernaut that is coming towards education rapidly, and it's holding AI's hand really closely, and that is VR and AR. And Pritin is in the room from Mesh, and he does some amazing training around Gravity Sketch. Has anybody tried one of these on? Yeah, lots of nods. Anybody got one in their school? A couple of people? Anyone got one at home?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that you, or is that?
No, my children.
Yeah.
Obsessed.
Yeah, brilliant. So children are using this a lot at home, and they are getting them for Christmas, and the price point's coming down. There is also a new release of the Meta Quest 3 is now there's now a release of Meta Quest 3S, and it's much more affordable. There are also programs where organisations and companies are providing class packs, rental packs, and there's subsidies, and it's becoming easier for schools to consider getting this into their classroom. So at CLEAPS we've been doing a lot of research into the health and safety of the physical implications of wearing this, and you know, kids literally walking into tables and that kind of level of safety, to the level of mental health safety, to the level of what kind of cognitive impact it has wearing it for certain lengths of time. But you can take artificial intelligence and you can take the concept of immersive learning, which really is a juggernaut coming towards us, and you can do it. And it doesn't need a headset necessarily. You can just do it on PC. I'm not sure this is a video or just a still. Oh, it is a video. So this is a revision room that I made now 2 years ago for my GCSE product design class, using these tools that are put at the bottom. So I was able to generate 360-degree room, which was an AI image, and then using ThingLink, which is a fantastic tool if you've never used it. It's View Smiles. Have you used ThingLink before? No? Okay. Maybe you're just smiling because you know I'm near the end. But ThingLink's great because you just link things to it, but the things that you link to it could be AI generated or could be AI enhanced. So I made this immersive revision room, and it ended with a Google form for the students to get some formative assessment at the end. But in it, it had, as you saw, some avatars teaching them. And now, yeah, in hindsight, the avatars are maybe a little over-sexualized, and maybe I might want to rethink that. But those heads were teaching. This is the 6 hours of sustainability, says sustainability personified, and she just says it on a loop, and she's just going and going and going and going until the class understands what the 6 hours are for their exam. So you can make your own resources, is what I'm trying to say, and you can make your own resources really quickly and really cheaply, and these resources can have an impact on our young people who are used to this kind of world when they get home and they put their headsets on, or they get home and they're gaming, or they're living in this sort of TikTok world. We need to meet them where they are, and we need to think about how to make our learning more engaging. And AI is making it easier for us to do that in a really quick and a really succinct way. Gravity Sketch I already mentioned is fantastic. If you've not tried Gravity Sketch, it's just amazing. You draw around yourself, you're immersive, you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. If you want to talk about Gravity Sketch at all, come find Pritin and he can show you, and he's in the village afterwards, and you can go and have have a go. But it is really fabulous. I work for Cleeps and we have a magazine. It's digital, it's interactive, and it's completely free for everybody, whether you're a member or not. And a couple of years ago, we had an AI special. In this, we had articles from across the country, but also further afield. There were lots of international articles. I think a couple of them came from Australia, on how to use AI within the design and technology curriculum. And these are real life case studies. Teachers saying, I did this with my year 10s, I tried this out with year 7, etc. So head to Future Minds for up-to-date Cleeps news, a wealth of articles on all sorts of things to do with D&T, but this specific article for AI. Nice move slides. We done? No? Oh wait. I think that's it actually. That was it. The last one. I can put it back on. Shouldn't have rushed you off. Does anybody have any questions? No? Yes?
What about the environmental?
Well, if you go to the DFE guidance, we did a whole video and whole section on the environmental impacts of AI. It's a really mixed bag because whether we like it or not, it's happening. So we have to use it, but then we don't necessarily need to overuse it. So there's a time and a place, and just like a time and a place to use plastic, just like a time and a place to drive rather than water. So at the moment, that's kind of where I'm at with it. But yes, the environmental impacts of AI also need to be considered and also need to be taught. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.